Patrick Kearney didn't look the part. Short, bespectacled, neat, the kind of person you wouldn't look at twice in a crowd. But if you lived in Southern California in the 1970s and saw his black 1967 Ford Mustang parked along the highway, you might have just kept walking, unaware you were in the presence of one of America's most prolific serial killers. Welcome back to True Crime with Jackson. Today we're delving into the life and crimes of Patrick Wayne Kearney, a man whose personal demons and cold calculation left a grisly legacy spanning over a decade. Born in Texas in 1939, Kearney was the first of 3 sons. His early years weren't marked by the sort of mind-shattering chaos seen in some serial killers' childhoods. No notorious headlines, no open violence, but there were red flags. He was a quiet, withdrawn teenager, bullied at school for being small and unassuming. More crucially, he'd later admit to harboring violent fantasies, even as he projected a polite and restrained exterior. By his 20s, Kearney had moved out west, sun-soaked California, a state newly alive with opportunity and anonymity. It was the 1960s, and Los Angeles was booming. Kearney found work as an engineer at a defense contractor in Redondo Beach, living with his partner, David Hill. They'd been together for nearly a decade, their relationship mostly invisible in an era when such things were rarely spoken about openly. But Kearney, beneath the quiet routine, had already descended into a darkness no one around him seemed to detect. The murders began in the late 1960s. His victims, drifters, young men, often hitchhikers or runaways, were lured into his car, sometimes with offers of rides or companionship. Kearney targeted vulnerability, people no one would miss right away, men in their late teens and early 20s, living on the margins of society. For years, reports of bodies began to turn up along the highways and dusty ravines stretching from Los Angeles to the Mexican border. But police couldn't connect the dots. The remains were often decomposed, sometimes just bones, or worse, only body parts, rendered anonymous by time and the elements. He was meticulous and mobile. Kearney had a chilling routine. He'd pick up his victims, drive them to remote areas or back to his home, and kill them with shocking efficiency. Most of his murders were committed with a gunshot to the head, swift, clinical, emotionless. He would then engage in acts of mutilation and dispose of the bodies along rural routes, often dismembering them to hinder identification. Kearney's method earned him a grim nickname, the trash bag killer. He'd wrap his victims' remains in heavy-duty plastic bags before leaving them in canyons, dumps, or remote outskirts. Detectives for years had only fragments, a limb here, a torso there, all wrapped in black polyethylene. For nearly a decade, the killings continued with chilling regularity. Over 20 victims, perhaps as many as 43, their stories lost in the silence that protected Kearney. He kept to himself, rarely drawing attention, nurturing a reputation as a gentle, almost invisible neighbor. It wasn't until 1977 that the case broke. 2 young men, John LeMay, age 17, and Robert Bennell, age 19, disappeared within weeks of each other. Both had been last seen in the vicinity of Kearney's apartment, but this time, investigators have more to go on. Witnesses for the first time described LeMay visiting Kearney's home. When police questioned Kearney, they found him evasive, nervous. Meanwhile, David Hill, terrified by his partner's secrets, quietly left town. Kearney, realizing the net was closing in, did something rare for serial killers. He surrendered. He walked into a Riverside police station with an attorney and calmly confessed. But what stunned authorities was not just his cooperation. It was the sheer scope of what he admitted to. He confessed to killing at least 28 young men over the past decade, providing names, circumstances, and grisly details. Over the following weeks, more confessions poured out. He described in clinical detail how he picked up victims, how he committed murder, even where he had dumped remains. Investigators were able to close dozens of cold cases, finding answers to mysteries that had haunted families for years. Kearney was tried and found guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. He's still alive today, serving his term at California State Prison in Mule Creek, far from the highways and bright lights of Los Angeles. But why did he do it? Kearney told authorities he killed out of compulsion, an urge he described with clinical detachment. He didn't blame his upbringing or his partner. His crimes, he claimed, were not driven by hate, but by an overpowering drive. A darkness that grew greater every time he got away with it. Patrick Kearney's story is a stark reminder evil doesn't always have a face you expect. Sometimes it's the person you barely notice, the quiet man at the end of the bar, the cordial neighbor with nothing remarkable about him at all. Thanks for joining True Crime with Jackson. If you want more stories about the darkest corners of the human mind, subscribe and stay tuned. Until next time, stay safe and don't trust appearances even for a second.